Hello and welcome to What's New in F#. I'm fairly new to the F# community. I've been doing F# a little bit on the side, but I got serious about it about 3 months ago. And when I did that, one of the things that I worked on is a little project that I'm going to show you today, and it shows why I love F#. Let's take a look at that code. So first of all, what am I trying to do here? I'm going to change a string from being in kebab case to being in camel case. And in order to do that, I need to take out the dashes and make the letter following that a capital letter. It's kind of a nice little thing to do in a new language, just to see how things shake out with the basics. Now, I'm going to admit, what you're going to see here is not the first version that I did. The first version I did, I said, it's a functional language. I'm going to go do cool stuff. And I had fold back. And Don looked at it and he said, why don't you just code it? Why don't you just write code? And so what you're going to see here is what happens with F# when you say, let me just write the code. So first of all, you'll see that there is an entry point which is marking where we're starting the application. Now, I don't need that. I actually could just write code. That'd be fine. The problem then is I would have to get the args from system.environment.command line args, and the first entry would be the name of the DLL, and I don't want to deal with that. So instead, I'm using an entry point which hands me the args. So the next thing, let's take a look at this, is that it's an indentation-based language. That means the blocks are very obvious, very clear, it's very nicely laid out and clean. Another thing you might notice is there's no parentheses around the args. Parentheses in F# are used only for grouping, commas are used only for tuples. Then you'll say, where are the types? There's no types here. Then if we hover over args, we'll see that it is in fact a string array as we would expect. And if we hover over main, we'll see that the signature is what we'd expect, taking string args and then returning an int. So that's what we'd expect. Now, you'll also see that when we return the value of 0, it returns just as a 0. So in F#, when we work with an expression, the last line just gets returned. No return keyword is needed there. So let's see how it actually plays out. What does the actual code look like? And let's start by looking at this signature. Now, that signature says that it's a sequence of characters. So if we know .NET, we say, yeah, a string can become a sequence of characters, but it's not really the signature that I expected. So let's fix that. I'm going to position the caret in input and hit Control period. That brings up just a normal fixer. We're used to this. But this one says to add a type annotation. When I do that, I get the wrong type. I get the type that the compiler thinks I'm using instead of the type I want. But I can just change that. So I'll change that to string. Now, you notice that parentheses are included here. And that's because, in this case, we're grouping that type with that argument name. OK, so let's get rid of some of that. And let's actually look at what the code looks like. Again, indentation, very clean. The first line is mutable in a functional language. Mutable is fine. The thing is, you don't want to do it accidentally. So F# all up is immutable by default. So you only have mutable characteristics. You can only do mutable code when you do invest in the ceremony. You do have the mutable keyword on the declaration, and then you have the funny backwards arrow saying put false into this location. So with that, we can look at the loop, which is a simple loop with a for, else, if, and then the else. The first case handles when the previous character was a dash, and it makes it a capital. The second one just sets that flag and does nothing, meaning nothing will be put into the array. And finally, if neither of those is true, it's just the character that was passed as part of the loop. So all of that is wrapped in a square bracket, which denotes a collection, and it would be a F# list if it was just the square bracket, but adding that pipe makes it an array. So we wind up with an array of characters, which we can pass to the string constructor. In F#, you don't have to say new before you call a constructor. You can just say string, and then here's the argument, which in this case is the character array, and we get a string back. So I'm going to just hit F5 here in order to run this to see if it actually does what we expect it to do. Hello.NET Conf, hello.NET Conf, hello.NET Conf. All right, so we've got that. And there's one more thing I want to show you before we go on to the rest of F# 6, and that is what tests look like. So here's a test it's just an X unit test in F#. And the big thing I want to point out is that double tick. So the double tick allows us to put any character we want inside, and it's still a symbol name. Now, the character you care most about is a space, because as you can see here, I've got a very nice clause of a sentence in the way that we like to see in test names, without any underscores or extra trouble. I can put anything in there. I can even, I'm kind of showing off, just put double quotes in there. So what is this going to look like in Test Explorer? So now we have exactly what we would like to read, which is when converting to camel case, my cool name returns my cool name. So we see exactly what we want here. So now if we're ready to go, I'm going to bring Don in, and I'm going to let him talk more about F# 6. We're not going to cover the whole thing today. There's a blog post on that. But we're going to focus on some of the best parts that we want to show you to move forward with F# 6 and get you excited about it. Take it away, Don.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Kathleen, for that introduction. It has been wonderful to be working with Kathleen over the last 3 months as we prepare the feature set for F# 6 and as we deliver it out. And I've got to say, Kathleen has this amazing taste for simplicity in coding. She really focuses in on the things that really matter to help make experiences more simple, more comprehensible. She really takes the position of the developer and the person who's also the person who's learning to code. And she's that's one of her real specialties. And it's really wonderful that she's been to work with so far. And so I'm going to be telling you a little bit about the themes of F# 6. Now, the themes of F# 6 are the same as the themes of F# all the way through. And in a lot of the way we talk about F#, we've changed things a little to be talking less about it as a functional language or anything like that. We let the properties of the kind of programming you can do with F#, which includes functional programming and many other kinds of programming, even some of the things we've seen with Kathleen just now, and lets you draw out the themes: succinct, robust, and performant. And the themes of F# 6 are the same as the themes of F# have always been: succinct, robust, and performant. And I'm just going to actually not talk about the full feature set of F# 6 because there's too many little things that need to be talked about. And instead, this is just going to be a taste of a couple of the features that we would like to highlight for you. And one of those features, we thought we'd start with something really kind of fun that I think everybody's going to enjoy, who's already an F# programmer or who's going to be new to F#, and that is pipeline debugging, and then this tweak to the debugging information called variable shadowing. And I'm going to show those by demonstration. And here we are in debugging here. And so earlier on today, I thought, what will I do today? And so I was thinking I was going to look at some uses of this wonderful library, which is called f#.data. You can find out all about the f#.data library. I'm just going to type it into the browser here, if I can type correctly. F#data, data access made simple. And you can find out all about this, how to work with CSV, HTML, JSON, XML data in F#. And I'm going to be doing a mix of scripting. I've referenced a couple of NuGet packages here. And I am, now, one of the things you can do with F# data is a bit of screen scraping. And so what you can do is you can go to a web page, something like this. The list of Doctor Who episodes. For old-timers of Doctor Who, you can find all the different seasons and all the different episodes that have ever been broadcast, and a whole lot of different information about who directed them, who wrote the scripts, what the titles were, and everything else. And you can give any web page to the HTML provider, and it will give you strongly typed access to the structure of that web page. So it will go, it says, well, this web page is just a nice piece of data. So we're going to give you access to all of this lovely data. So I'm now going to extract some episodes from this, and we're going to go up to season 6 of 1969, and we're going to extract the episodes here. And you can see that the episodes are being listed down in F# Interactive down below. So I've been just taking some F# code and executing it. Now, we are going to do some analysis. So what we've done is for the first 6 tables, we've extracted out information about the episodes, the title, the director, and the views. And of course, once you have a list of episodes here, you want to do various kinds of analyses on it, such as grouping and averaging out the number of views and then sorting by the number of views. Or we might get, so this is getting the average by director, or we might do a different average for the how many people watched the episodes that involve Daleks. So get the average by director and get the average by Dalekness. And then we go through and we print a report at the bottom, and then I'll take this code out here and we print the report and you get the code being run. Now, one of the features that's new in F# 6 is that you can now set breakpoints on pipelines like this. So I'm going to set 2 breakpoints, let's say there, and we can run the project now. And you can see we've stopped at this first breakpoint. We're getting the averages by the director. And what is different now is, first of all, you can actually set breakpoints at any point down the pipeline. And now when you stop at a breakpoint here, you can also see what are the inputs and the stages of the pipeline. So you can see here that at line 59, we had an input, which was episodes, and we can in fact just look at that. And you can see all the different episodes from the very first ones and all the Dalek invasion of Earth, it's showing it up to 50 in the pipe input. Then you can see what happened after we averaged out the number of views. So now what happened after we did the grouping, okay? And you can now see that the data at the bottom here is now grouped by the different directors. You can see in the debugger exactly what we grouped by director. And sure enough, we have all the directors. And for instance, if we're interested in what Richard Martin did, you can see that he directed 21 episodes, and you can find the grouping there. And finally, you can see what happened after we averaged out the number of views on the last stage of the pipeline at line 61. And you can see now that the different directors had their different number of millions of viewers in the UK back in the 1960s. So, and if we just continue on, we'll get the next one, and then we can see we've got 2 stages of the pipeline. If I hit F10 at this point, sorry, F10, then we can just step on to the next stage of the pipeline and continue on with the program. So pipeline debugging, I've been absolutely loving using this feature. It was a surprisingly simple feature to implement, and it's one of the first times actually in the way that we've done tooling for F# that we're really getting, and this really did come out of working with Kathleen, that really saying, we got to make this experience really simple for the very core features of F# programming. Make sure people can debug, understand what is going on for these kind of, so much of F# programming comes down to this kind of pipeline programming. Now I've continued on with the program here, and I want to show you another feature here, because you can see in the report that we're printing out the titles by director. We're printing out the episodes by director. We're printing out which ones contain the Daleks. We're getting the average by director. We're getting the average by Dalekness, and then we're printing those 2 groups out. But we've made a mistake here. And if the mistake that we've made is this, that if we continue on down to here, the averages here is referring to this averages, which is actually the averages by Dalekness and not the averages by director. And that is because F#, and this is related to some of the ways that F# works in its feature set. F# does allow you to use the name averages twice, and you'll see this one is actually highlighted in a different color to say it wasn't actually used anywhere, but it might have been used, but you'd still have this kind of problem. For instance, if we if we use averages on this slide. So, but what you can see now as you hover over this averages here is you've got the shadowed averages, that this one is no longer in scope. It has been outscoped by this one. And you've got the current one that is in scope. So if we go back to here, just to check what actually happened there, then you'll see we've got no averages in scope, and we press F10, then we get one averages in scope, which is this one here. And we go on and then we get the next one, and you'll see that the first averages is now shadowed, and it had 25, the average by director, and the second averages is now in scope, which the averages by Dalekness. And if we just continue on with the program and we run, taking these off here all the way through, then just to conclude the analysis, you can find out the definitive proof that the episodes with Daleks had considerably more viewers than the episodes without Daleks. So even back then, the Daleks were a big favor in the land of Doctor Who. So that's pipeline debugging. Now, one thing you might have noticed along the way is that in F#5, if you wanted to index into the episodes here, for instance, the very first episode of Doctor Who is this one, 4.4 million viewers. Now, in F#6, so we'll give this a name, let episode 1 equal that. And now in F#6, you actually don't need that dot anymore. And you might say, why did you? So we made this revision. We made this simplification to F# to be more normal as a language, to be just like so many other languages in the world of .NET, in the world of programming, and that this dot actually, in the design sort of principles of F#, that dot was not particularly necessary. The type of episodes gives us enough information, and we decided to simplify the language at this point and allow the use of indexing and slicing without using the dot. Now, you can read up more about that change and why we made it back in the various RFCs for F#. So that's just to mention. Actually, I mentioned this first. So why does it matter? That dot was losing people for no reason. And you might say, well, surely it doesn't matter that much to people. But I can assure you, if you show F# machine learning code, for example, to particular kinds of audiences, if the first thing where you do a lot of indexing and you do a lot of slicing, the first thing they see is the dot, they just go, oh, I'm not going to listen anymore. Okay, it's actually really we talked to a lot of, and these people might be incredibly, they're not just very, very good at what they do, but they're deciding to reject the language for some particular reason. So F# was losing people for no particular reason. In practice, this makes the experience of reading and learning and using F# simpler. And in some ways, I consider this to be making F# better by moving it to where it already sort of was in the design, in its design. So F# isn't changing to become something else, but we are making these things that make it more itself, make it better by moving it to where it already was. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is the other major feature, which is task. And there are a lot of other features in F#6, so please go and have a look at them. But task is one of the most important technical features that we've built in. And I'm just going to do that by talking about, by giving a bit more of a demonstration here. So first of all, some very basic programming. So this is straight up F#6 code. We can, if we do a module demo, and I want to do a function of some kind, some function, and it takes an argument x, and I want to make a task, then I just do task like this, and then I do return x plus x. Okay, so that's just a simple function. We look at its type. It takes an integer, and it returns a task, which will eventually return an integer. And if we do some second function here, and we want to wait for another task, so if we want to wait for the first task here, And so we do x plus x into there. And then we do let result equal, we do let bang is the way we wait for things in F#. We do let bang the result number 1, result 1. And we do result 1 plus result 1, for example. And so again, this is a function from an integer to a task. Now, F# has an asynchronous programming model. In fact, F# pioneered the idea of having async in the language. And in fact, you can, for instance, change these to do async. And the async programming in F# is extremely nice, has lots of very lovely properties. But it differs technically from .NET tasks in some crucial ways. And they're ways which created a lot of dissonance between working for async programming, and then you'd have to go and use .NET libraries which were using tasks. You would have to do things like async.start as task in order to generate a task. And if something was returning a task, like here, with some function here, then in order to await something, you'd have to do async.await task. Okay. And this is, async programming is really nice. It's got a lot of very nice properties, but when you have to do too much of this kind of task-based programming, then it becomes, there's quite a lot of high ceremony involved in the way it works. And so for a set of reasons, a lot of which are to do with interoperability, we decided just to allow you to also do task programming directly. So here's a typical piece of code I took from a sample on the web, which is making an HTTP client, creating a set of asyncs here, awaiting a set of tasks, waiting for those in parallel using async, getting the sum of the page lengths, and then starting that as a task. And so how does that look in F#, in F#6? Well, you can just create the task directly. So you can actually just get rid of these parts here. You can create the task there. Now, async.parallel actually becomes task.whenAll. And at the bottom, you don't have to start the task. And now you've got your I've converted the first sample into the second sample. So now we've got, this is how to do the async version here. If I take that off, you'll see that it's returning an async. And this is how to do the same using tasks. Just to give some parallels, if you're using async.run synchronously, the equivalent is task.result. You should be very careful about using task.result because it waits for that task synchronously. And in some ways, it may be better to define yourself a task.run synchronously, which you can, or task.wait for this synchronously, which you can make those points very clear in your code. If you were using async.parallel, you do task.whenAll, async.choose, you do task.whenAny, start as task not needed, await task is not needed. And the other important things you need to know, some of them are covered in a really excellent blog post by Compositional IT. They're covered in the core technical material, but I'd also point you to this really good blog post by Ryan Palmer on asynchronous workflows and task versus async. And you can also look at the technical documentation in the F# docs. Okay, so that's tasks, and those are the features we wanted to draw out today, and thanks for listening to those. There's lots more in the announcement post. There's everything. There's language simplifications, to language improvements, additions to the F# core library, there are general improvements to .NET and Visual Studio. In each of the features, you can do a deep dive and look into the RFCs, look into the whole design process, look into how we implemented them. So there are links through to the pull requests that implemented the features, and links right back in time to the original suggestions for when the features were first suggested. So take a look at the RFCs and also at the technical documentation on docs.microsoft.com/F#.
And go ahead.
Kathleen, yes, over to you for this slide, Kathleen.
Right. So one of the things that we did is just a couple hours ago, we also put up a new post, which is, we haven't had a chance to link to here yet, and that covers a couple of important things. One is it's been tons of work in the last few weeks even on documentation, improving F# docs. You'll find out more about it there. You'll also find out what's going on in the ecosystem. So F# is very dependent on the ecosystem for tools that you use, and two of the biggest ones are Fantomas and Ionide. And Fantomas has been hard at work accommodating Visual Studio 2022's changes to the physics system. That's up and available. There's still a couple things to settle on Fantomas, but you can read about that in the blog post. And then Ionide, I heard they worked our weekend, but Ionide is up for F#6 and brand new, so if you find any problems, let them know. So F# just keeps moving, you wait 2 weeks and you wind up with new stuff happening. So with that, you know, we can start wrapping this up. The other thing is to thank the community. F# is a community effort. We work with the community on everything that we do. And so if you'd like to be part of F#, whether it's telling us your pain points, remember, I'm all about trying to simplify languages and make them easy for you to use. And I know there are pain points in F#. The ones I find may not be the same points that you find. So please come to the repo. There's more in today's blog post about how to get in touch with us in the repo. Let us know what you think so that we can start smoothing out some of these rough edges, things like getting rid of the dot. We'll do more of that coming up. And so I want to thank you for being with us today, and I think we'll wrap it up with that.
All right.
Amazing.
Thank you very much, Dawn and Kathleen, for talking to us about what's new in F#6. Let's see if we have a question or two here. Again, you can ask our questions here at .NET Conf, and we'll put them on the big board. Luis has a question. What's the best way to learn how to start? It can seem a little overwhelming when you want to learn F#.
Absolutely. So one of the things, and I hate to keep referring to this blog post from a couple of hours ago, but it was a matter of what do we still need to say? There is a fantastic video series on YouTube by Luis Quintanilla. I apologize if I didn't get that quite right, Luis, but he has an amazing series on YouTube which is going to walk you right through all of the beginning stages of F# and let you get comfortable with those parts. What else do we have?
Cool. Here's a question that I know how to say the words, but I don't know what they mean.
Oh dear, we might be done for it.
What is the best way to do optional values in records in F#?
I mean, the best way for optional values in records in F# is just to use the F# option value. And if you need, then you can create a helper method to create the record where you can take optional arguments. So use a combination of those two features.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. All right.
Thank you so much, both of you.
And then that point about the video from Luis, I want to point friends to the .NET website, and you click on Learn and then Videos. You can see all the different 101 videos, including this one here from Luis, F# 101. That's a great way to start. That is on YouTube. You can check that out.
Yes.
And this live session that you just did with Dawn, Kathleen, will be available on demand later as well.